And welcome to a little bit of a different episode of DB2 if you've watched some of our stuff. Pretty focused on fantasy football up to this point. We're going to branch out, talk a little college football. We've got the playoff and the bowl games getting started, but there's been a lot of debate on is four correct? Is there something else that's better? We're just going to kind of go through the options, give you our opinion on them, what we think they should do, and kind of see where this lands on, what it would lead to, what the college landscape would look like in this kind of new world of college football. It's already changing a crazy amount with the transfer portal and NIL and all that kind of stuff. So it seems to be the time where college football is changing the most. Maybe there's another change to come. So David Brem here with Daniel Butler as always. If you haven't seen us before, Butler, you want to get us started on this?
I absolutely do. I've been chomping at the bit for this. I'm
You're
so
so
excited.
excited for this
I am
episode.
so excited. I've been thinking about this actually for a little while. I hadn't told you. I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, we're kind of getting towards the end of fantasy football season. Let's talk about this. So, we have found the absolute perfect way to fix college football. Don't have to go anywhere else. It's right here.
Yeah, we're the
What
experts.
we're going to talk about this in kind of odd order because we're going to probably save the best stuff till we'll kind of talk about the flaws and stuff, and then we'll talk about what we think is the best. So
Yeah.
starting off, I'm actually going to go back in the machine a little bit. If you're watching and you're really young, you may not even remember this, but it used to be a BCS. You would have some computers like figuring out who the number one and number two team were, if you
Oh,
remember, and they
good
actually
old
had
days.
a strength of like how many point spread. So like I think it was like Oklahoma, like why am I Bob Stoops? He put up like 70 on people.
Oh
He's
yeah.
like just completely destroy them because the computers loved it.
Yeah,
So
you would just route the D2
yeah,
teams.
yeah, just put up so many points. And yeah, the computer system loved it. They obviously took that out because that was a flaw. But it used to take two teams, and then they ended up adding, I think, the AP college, the coaches poll. They put it all in one, and they had the computers. And anyway, it was two teams. They messed around with it, but it was two teams. So this year, if that happened, you would have Alabama against Michigan in the national championship. And I'm going to be honest with you, I personally will go ahead and say I don't think two teams. I think it's unfair to a lot of teams because I personally don't hate it. I mean, this year, I think
This year,
that
yes, this year, that's
Alabama
probably how it's gonna end up.
versus Georgia was then a if you win, you are playing for the national championship. And Michigan playing Iowa. If Michigan wins, you're playing for the national championship. Some crazy high stakes games, which they already were, obviously, because they're in the playoff. And then you get Alabama versus Michigan. I think a lot of people would agree that Alabama and Michigan are at least two of the top three teams from what we've seen. Obviously,
Yeah,
Georgia, even though Alabama beat them, I think a lot of people still think Georgia's pretty good. Maybe they think that Alabama and Georgia are the best, and maybe even Cincinnati. But for this year, it's
as
Alabama
much
and
as I'd like that to be
Michigan.
true.
So, what do you think about two teams and why? I mean, I think we know it's
Yeah,
not very good
yeah.
because we got rid
So,
of it, but
yeah, I hate the two-team system, absolutely. I think to have, these teams play a full season and it literally just come down to you have no, like unless you're at the very top, you have no chance at anything is insane. This is one of the few years where I think if we still were in the two-team system, nobody would have argued. Like,
like
this is one of the
Cincinnati would have been upset and said we there should be more
yeah, but
teams,
they
but they
also
would they
yeah, they
obviously the
would
schedules don't really they beat Notre
yeah.
Dame, but they
They would
don't
have been
really
upset
match
there
up.
wasn't a playoff, but they wouldn't have been upset that they weren't 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Like, I think they would have understood they weren't 1 or 2, but they would have been upset there wasn't a playoff. So I think this is one of the few years, but if you are, a little bit older like we are and you remember these times, this is very rare. This never happened. Like, where there was a clear cut, like, both at Michigan and Alabama both basically had a play-in game if that was the same system.
Yeah,
So,
and there would have been, I think, when Ohio State played Michigan, when it was one versus number two many years ago, a lot of people were arguing that Michigan, even though losing that game, like 42-39, I think the final was, that Michigan still should have been ranked two and should have been a rematch for the national championship. I think that was the year that Florida got in, and then Florida just absolutely trounced Ohio
yeah,
State.
kinda
Uh,
shut that narrative down pretty
so
quick.
probably a good thing it wasn't Ohio because that was clearly not the two best teams in the country. So I think the big thing is that we think that Michigan and Alabama would probably be those would be 1-2. We do know that if it was the old system, but it doesn't really feel like we don't know for sure that we have the two best teams in the country and we
No,
crown the
because I
correct
really
national champion.
No, because I think there's a lot to be said for Michigan having to beat Georgia to get that chance. So
Yeah.
while I wouldn't have been angry about this is like I said, one of the few years I wouldn't have been angry about a 1-2. This is a much better system than we have currently because Michigan has to prove themselves versus Georgia before they get that chance.
And Cincinnati now at least gets their shot. They do have that big win
Yeah,
against
they get
Notre
a
Dame.
shot, but
And Georgia just has the one loss. A lot of people don't like the fact that Georgia, some people thought Georgia shouldn't be in the top four. They got beat pretty well, pretty bad by Alabama, but they went 12-0 up until that point. They only have one loss, just like all these other teams outside of Cincinnati. They just have one loss. Alabama's loss was worse. Michigan's loss was worse. So, yeah.
well, and I don't know how you could watch football this season and think that Notre Dame deserves it more than Georgia.
Yeah,
Like
I don't think, and obviously Cincinnati was always going to get in over Notre Dame because they beat them in South Bend. Okay, so two, we can pretty much say that though it would have worked out this year, at least it wouldn't have been crazy like some other years.
it works at about 10% of the time.
We would not have liked it, and we're glad it's not
Plus,
two
it's less
anymore.
football.
Yeah,
Who
but
wants that?
let's go to the other end of the spectrum. So okay,
Okay.
maybe not two. So okay, two.
64.
Uh, I'm not going to go to 64 because I personally think that's actually impossible to have students play that many
No,
games.
no,
Uh,
you play a short 6-game season, and then it's tournament time, baby.
uh, I don't think they can pull that off in college football, but I'm going to go to 16. How about that? So we're going to go to 16,
Alright.
which means if you play all the way through and you get to the final game, you would be playing 4 games. If I did my math correct, which I may not have, but that would be 4 extra games on top of the games you would play throughout
Correct.
the regular season. So this year, what that would look like is Alabama versus Oklahoma. Oklahoma's a 16 seed, and I could quickly go through the matchups. I don't even think I have to, but
Yeah.
the big thing is that BYU, the bottom, let's say the bottom five here, Pittsburgh, 12, BYU, Oregon, Iowa, and Oklahoma. And I think you can already kind of get this when you see those teams that these teams, like Oregon got trounced by Utah, Iowa got trounced by Michigan, Oklahoma not looking great. None of these
No.
teams seem deserving at all, and you just don't
No.
think they don't even have a shot, in my opinion, to even. They,
Well, they don't have a shot to make it through a tournament. They have a shot to upset some people. But here's my biggest issue with 16, and you might see a trend here. Iowa, Oregon, Utah. Those are my big 3 issues. They have 3 losses on the season. 3 losses. I'm sorry. In college, like 16 is insane for the fact that we would have 3 teams with 3 losses in the playoff.
I will
Like
tell you this: Utah is playing really well, and I would not be shocked, obviously, if Utah would beat the 7 Baylor or beat
oh yeah.
whoever. I wouldn't be shocked if they beat Ohio State this year.
I
Uh,
mean, they'd have a shot Notre Dame. They'd have a like they'd have a
They're
shot
playing
against a lot
well.
of
I
these
mean, they
teams.
just
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that I think the fact that they Oregon got trounced by them and still would make it, again with 3 losses as well. I mean, I know they beat Ohio State, but that's basically it, for Oregon. And that was first game of the season. So for me, I think this is way too many. I do like the idea of we're going to talk more about this later. I do like the idea of some of these games would be fantastic. Some of these would be
Yeah.
amazing. Even that Alabama versus Oklahoma, that very first game
That's the thing is
in
like that.
Tuscaloosa,
Yeah,
that
that's
would
a heck of
be
a
amazing.
yeah.
Michigan
My
versus Iowa, they would definitely not do that again. That would be how it
no,
worked out this
they would
year.
fudge the rankings, but
Michigan versus Oregon, maybe, but some of these other ones you would get that would be not at all that interesting. But yeah,
yeah.
even like Ole Miss versus Oklahoma State this year, I
I
think could be a
mean,
pretty
am I
solid
doing
game
the
as well.
math right? Yeah, it would be BYU Cincinnati. Like,
Oh yeah, the 4 versus the 13. Um,
but my big thing too is here with 16. I love the college football regular season. Like, it means so much. Like, you get that second loss, and you're anything but an absolute stud of a powerhouse program, your season is done. Like the fact that the regular season means that much, it doesn't mean that much in any other sport, really. Like where a second loss essentially ruins your season. Like there's some you can say like, oh, it shouldn't. Like you still don't have. No, I love that. I love. I'm a TCU guy. It happens pretty early in the season. Recently, we get that second loss when TCU gets their first loss. They're pretty much out, but when you get your second loss, you just know, like, I'm sorry, this is not your year. Time to start focusing on next year and beating your rivals. Like, I don't want to take away what the regular season in college football means.
Yeah, and I definitely, I mean, there's always going to be good matchups with this, but I think sometimes less is more. And in this case, you're adding 4 games to some, so that's going to obviously diminish the. You're going to make not just diminish it because the games don't matter as much, but also like it actually diminish it by quantity. You're not going to have as many games in the regular season because
Yeah.
you can't have kids playing 16 games.
No, they'd have to cut
Um,
down to
so you're probably playing
probably
like
10
10,
team, maybe
right?
11.
So you can't have them playing that much, in my opinion. I know they're getting being paid and stuff now, but that's just a lot of football
Yeah.
for some 18, 19, 20 year olds. I think so. I think I think 16 is too many. I do think sometimes some of the matches would be really awesome because you don't see them, but still I think it's too many. And yeah, I think some of these games would be a complete waste of time. Alabama facing these lower seeds, they would. I mean, they would just like make a point to win
I
by like
mean,
60.
it
But
would the only positive for this is the same thing for the college basketball tournament is you can see insane upsets.
yeah,
Like that is the only benefit of this system.
yeah, like I mean, you're going to sometimes see. Now they're at. I don't know if you would see like a 1 seed really ever getting beat too much. I mean, it would probably happen every so
I
often,
mean, yeah,
but
like Oklahoma hasn't played great, but you could see them getting up for one game and
and
taking
yeah.
Alabama out.
So I definitely think. I also think having the top seeds getting home games would
That might
that
come up later.
we'll see. So then I'm gonna move on to I actually saw Joel Klatt. I actually didn't have this on my radar when we were discussing
Yeah, you brought
originally.
this up before, and I'm like,
But 12 team playoff is really weird. I actually was. There's so many rules to it. Not really that many
yeah,
rules, but it's like
like
it's
12 is
kind.
already weird, and then his rules are out of this world.
So I think if I understand it correctly, and this was a few days ago, but the top 4 seeds get buys, and I believe it was the top 6 teams, the best champions. If you're a 1 through 6 seed, so it's not just a guaranteed spot. It's not an automatic qualifier like in the basketball tournament. It was automatic qualifier, and you get a top 6 seed. So if you win your conference, they take the top 6 conference champions. So in theory, you don't automatically bid,
The
but if you win like your big
if
conferences, you're gonna get
the
in.
Big Five, and
Yeah,
then you'd have one
most
group of
likely,
five.
unless like the Pac-12 is all for 1 year. But yeah, they're probably still getting their champion in.
Yeah.
So this year, you would have had Alabama, Michigan, Cincinnati, Baylor, Utah, the 5 seed, and Pittsburgh being the 6 seed, I think. So it's already kind of
Yeah,
weird.
looking at that, yeah.
It's already kind of weird. And then
I mean, that just moved the 12 up to the 6 seed.
I think
so, yeah.
then Georgia then would be the 7 seed. They'd be the first at-large team, and then you would get Notre Dame, which would never ever be inside the
That's
top
my
6,
biggest thing is
which
like
is kind of weird. But I guess they're
yeah.
like again want them to join a conference, I guess. But but anyway, so then you would take the top, and you could fill it in from there. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's how that would work. Top 6 champions and then top 6 at-large teams. Top 4 get bye weeks, and then 5, 6, 7, and 8 get home games against the higher seeds. So, or lower seeds, however you look at it. Those 5 through 8 will get the home games, and then they would go on, and then you would have 8 teams, and I would assume he didn't go farther than that, but I'm assuming then the top 4 seeds would then get home games, and then when we get down to 4, it would just be like the college football now. You would be that.
Yeah.
It's kind of confusing. It's a lot to it. I will say we're going to talk about this soon when we get to the lower ones. I do like the idea of some of these home games. We talked about this in 16. I think some of these games would be absolutely amazing. I think that's great. But one concern I have, and maybe save it to when we get to a different one, but a little bit. I don't know how I feel about 4 teams getting buys while the other 8 are playing. It just seems like a lot going on here, and
No.
I don't. I think it's a little much. And yeah, the fact that Notre Dame could never be a top 6 team, the fact that Georgia is automatically because they didn't win, even though they're in a very good conference and they're clearly the second or third best team, they fall down to 7. Just because they're in a great conference, it's like you're punishing them because they actually are in a good conference. Like, why wouldn't you not want to be like Clemson, and just play nobody? I mean, this year it didn't work out for him, but just play nobody
Oh yeah.
and just be a 1 or 2 or 3 seed.
Yeah. So In theory, I could almost be talked into 12. His insane rules, no, get out of here. Those are insane. There is part of me that doesn't hate the idea of 12. It still seems like a lot to me. It still seems like you're watering down. Like, I'm sorry, in a 12-team playoff, I can't picture a season where Alabama and Georgia aren't in the playoff. Like, I can't even imagine a situation where they're not top 12. Because you also have to think, like, even if they lose 3 games, the committee's going to put these big teams at 12. Like, they're going to make sure they get into this. So I still think 12 is too many. I don't like it. I would be more apt to accept 12 without the crazy conditions.
Yeah, if you just rank them 12 and then that's how it is.
And then
Um,
4 buys, 4 home games, like that part of it I don't hate. 12 seems like a lot to me still. I think you can probably guess where we're ending up on what we actually like. 12 still seems like a lot to me. I just think those rules are crazy. Like, I think those are insane.
yeah, so we're still in the spot where we're kind of diminishing the regular season.
Yeah,
12 is
you'd have to cut 1 game probably
uh
out
so
of the
so
regular
yeah,
season.
for the four teams getting buys in this case, like Georgia winning their first game, and then now they're the seventh seed, and they go to Michigan, let's say, and in this case, they're behind Michigan, so I guess that's fine. But I mean, again, they're going to Michigan. Okay, fine. And then, assuming if they get rid of it, then would they go? I don't know. If say there's now four
Yeah,
teams left,
there's so many
do then
issues.
they have to go to like Pittsburgh? Let's say they made a run. That'd be so weird. It's like, why would Georgia go to Pittsburgh? Whatever. I don't know if they would do that when it's down to four. They probably would keep the same deal they have going on right now.
As
There's
much as I would like to see any of these big name teams have to go into Nippert and play Cincinnati, it's a little crazy.
So it seems a little weird. I don't think they would ever go for something like this as
No.
well. Even if you think it's a great idea, I would like to. I'm like I like to look at like this as a problem that can be solved. Like I said, a perfect
Yeah.
solution, like one that can be solved and makes sense to do, and it could actually happen too. All of those very like would this even seem like something they would do? And I think there is very little chance that they would go this route. At least in that way of 12. Maybe they can make it to 12, but I still think 12 is too many. And I think college football, one of the best, the best things about college football, or maybe the best, is how good the regular season is. And I don't want to diminish that too much.
Yeah.
So, and with that said, like when we go back to two teams, I know we talked about that already. The regular season was really important, but some teams really
Yeah.
never got a shot. That was the problem there. Like you never really had a fair chance. So
Yeah.
some teams would you could have three
I mean,
undefeated
back
teams or
back
something.
then, especially, it also didn't even seem like one loss almost got you out of it
Depending on
in
some years,
almost every season. Like there was almost always an undefeated, and
I think there was a
like
lot of
in
times one undefeated and one loss team.
a
But
lot of
I
time.
think there was
But
one
that
year
one
there
loss
was
team was
three
always
undefeated
SEC.
teams. There was one year that
Yeah.
USC was the AP national champion. They didn't even make it. So like yeah, there was
Yeah, it
all
was a
kinds
mess.
of weird stuff. So let's go on, move on from that. We're getting into okay. So we're kind of like okay. So two, no, definitely not. 16, way too many. We haven't talked about 4, 6, or 8 yet. So
All right.
4.
Yeah,
So
let's touch on 4 real quick.
let's talk about 4. So this one I feel like they have a good chance of going with. I think there's a good chance that they decide to go with 4 teams. I
Yeah.
feel like there's a really good shot they go with. This year it would have been Alabama versus Cincinnati, and Michigan versus Georgia, and we'll see what happens. Not home games or anything like that, and
Yeah.
we will see what happens because of course that is what it is right now. So how do we feel about 4 with the current system? I think we both are in agreement it's better than 2.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
better than 2. This is actually, kinda like the 1-2 thing. This is one of the first years that I feel like 4 really got it right, and that's just because one of those undefeated group of 5 teams made it in, which is what we always wanted. We always wanted to see what these guys could do if we're given the chance. I still feel like 4 that doesn't happen. Like, everybody was so excited about Cincinnati this season because this doesn't happen. Like, those teams don't make it into the top 4. So
and
this year, I don't hate it. This year, I like it,
and
but
how close was Cincinnati to not getting in? I think you and I
oh,
both agree they were 1 yard
Oklahoma State,
away,
yeah,
1 yard away from not getting in.
Yeah,
which
if Oklahoma
Oklahoma
State
State
won,
win.
the committee would have loved to keep Cincinnati out.
Oklahoma State versus Alabama, I think they would say would be much more interesting, and they would have put Oklahoma State in. I think we both think that that would have happened. I mean, that would have been a great discussion, and maybe that would have prompted them to move on to 8 faster or 6 or whatever,
If
12,
Notre
whatever.
Dame's lost to anybody but Cincinnati, Cincinnati wouldn't be in. Like,
Yeah, for sure. I think 100%. Cincinnati boxed out Notre Dame. That was like the perfect win by them because
yeah,
not only they beat Notre, it was like the perfect storm here. They beat Notre Dame, and then Notre Dame proceeded to run the table.
yeah.
And the committee loves Notre Dame. You know, Notre Dame's a big team, so they
Oh,
rank
they
them
would
high.
have loved to put
So
Notre Dame
like,
in.
but Cincinnati's like you can't like you literally can't put them over Cincinnati because they went into South Bend and beat them. Even if it was at the beginning of the season, I'm sure the committee would have. But there probably were people in there like, you
Oh,
know what, Notre Dame.
until this was official, I still thought they were gonna put Notre Dame over them. Like, I knew it was gonna be tough, but also the committee has never cared about what's tough in public opinion. All they care about is the matchup. So I still, until the very end, thought that they were gonna find a way to sneak Notre Dame in, and I think nobody was rooting for Oklahoma State harder than every single person on that committee.
What's so funny is that yeah, what you said, Notre Dame losing to Cincinnati, even though it's technically a better loss because Cincinnati's undefeated. If Notre Dame would have lost to, I'll just pick a team, you know, even in the top 25, they would have lost to Clemson. We'll say they're not very good this year. That was their loss. I do agree. I think they would be number 4.
They
I
absolutely would.
think
No question.
they would say so. It's funny that's how like they could have had a worse loss or even I said a 20, you know, the 19th ranked Clemson. It could have been somebody awful, you know. It could have been
Yeah.
Rutgers.
They
Okay, maybe
they
not
could have lost
Rutgers,
to
but
Navy.
maybe.
If that Notre Dame loss was to Navy, they still would have put them in over Cincinnati.
So yeah, I think that it did work out this year because of Cincinnati. Obviously they had to win out. You know, we know they have
Yeah.
to win, which is fine because they don't really play anybody.
And
But
that's extraordinarily fair with those
yeah.
teams. They need to go undefeated.
But and they scheduled Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was good this year, and it happened that Notre Dame also ran the table. There was a lot of like had things that had to go right, and even with everything going right, they still were 1 yard away from
Yeah.
not making it. So yes, it did work out, but Oklahoma State would have been ranked 4. I think it would have been a great conversation. Don't know for sure, but we think Oklahoma State would have got in. A lot of people liked Oklahoma State
I
going in,
know it.
so you
I
know it.
know they would have.
So that's what we have this year, and I'm excited to see. Hopefully Cincinnati plays well. That would be really cool.
That's what I'm rooting for at this point. Is I'm just hoping they give them a game. Like, it'd be awesome if they beat them. I don't expect Cincinnati to beat Alabama. I actually expect this national championship to be an SEC
Yeah,
rematch. But
they're the big favorites in both
yeah.
games, so I think
Um
that's not going out on a limb.
and to be honest, if I was forced to bet on this, I think Georgia takes Alabama in the second matchup. But the fact that Cincinnati gets the chance on the national stage to play Alabama, and this is great just on a Cincinnati thing. I'm going to try not to talk about like they're going into the Big 12. Like, this is a big deal for them. They're going to be on the national stage. They get to play these teams. Like, this is what more teams in this playoff could do. Is this is going to really elevate this program to Cincinnati could be a team we see a lot in upcoming years in these high ranking in the rankings.
Yeah, they're recruiting well. I'm excited for what this is obviously going to help them a lot. I'm excited about this. Hopefully, we'll see. You know, if Cincinnati shocks the world and beats Alabama, that would be
Oh, I'd be ecstatic.
all right. So if you are a Cincinnati, or sorry, if you are a SEC fan,
Mhm.
are you rooting for not Alabama? So a fan of not Alabama.
Yeah.
Are you rooting for Alabama to win because for the conference sake, or because you are in the SEC and Alabama has crushed your soul for so long? Are you rooting for Alabama to lose and get, you know, I don't want to say humiliated, but it
Yeah.
would be, you know, some people would look at it that way. What do you think as
I I would assume I'm not in the SEC crowd. I don't know how they think. It seems like they're very conference proud. Um, I think anybody outside of an Auburn fan is probably rooting for Alabama in this game. Is how I would assume.
yeah,
Because the way I look at it is if this was a Big 12 team, if instead of Alabama, this was I like TCU. If this was, let's say, Texas up top, I don't like Texas, but the only team I'm not rooting for in that position is Baylor. So, like, I think other than their immediate rival, I think the conference is rooting for their
Yeah, in the
conference.
end, SEC could handle it if they lost this, but I'm just interested,
Yeah.
like, if
I
they
still have
lose, like,
Georgia.
and like they were still the best conference.
I think publicly most of the SEC is rooting for them, but I think privately there's a lot of them that
You know,
if Cincinnati pulled this off, they'd be like,
yeah,
"I didn't hate that."
I think a lot of more probably would be like, I'm okay with,
But definitely Auburn fans.
yeah, definitely. So, anyways, I just thought that would be interesting. So there's the four. Obviously, that's what we have now. It worked out okay this year, but really kind of lucked into it, I think. Now, okay, so four. What we haven't talked about is six, which has been discussed a decent amount, and eight.
Yeah.
I would say these are
So
probably the two most popular that get
yeah,
discussed, at least because you probably won't jump immediately to 12 or to 16. I
yeah.
don't think. So six or eight, and I
Which one
guess
of us wants to go first?
I will well, you go first with a six and tell like what would
Okay.
happen with
Yeah.
six.
So my thought is 6. I like 6 for a couple of reasons. Um, I feel like the regular season still means something. But my biggest thing is, like we talked about with 1 and 2, like getting 1 and 2 still means a lot because in 6 they'd have to have a bye week. So yeah, I know you're going to talk about this in a minute. How you feel about bye weeks? I still kind of lean towards they're good. They let you get healthy. They let you practice. So you're still playing for something to get that 1 and 2 slot. So the conference championships mean something. The regular season means something still. But at the same time, you get rewarded for being 1 and 2. We get more teams in. I mean, this year you would have added Notre Dame and Ohio State. Like those are big names that the committee would love to have games for. You get one extra game of football. Like you get so much more, and it's adding 2 teams. You're not watering down the regular season. You're not watering down who's getting in. You're still the only 2-loss team that would be in this season is Ohio State. I think the committee can all accept that that would be a great draw for them. They would put up a good game. They would play Georgia week 1. Like to have Georgia, Ohio State in the first week of the playoff would be awesome. This would be my preferred. It doesn't, like I say, water anything down. It gets more teams in. It gives you a reason to, because right now being ranked 1 versus being ranked 3 doesn't really mean anything hardly. Like you get a little bit easier this year. It does because everybody kind of assumes Cincinnati is going to be a little bit of a layup, but in general, that doesn't mean much. This now gives you a reason to shoot for that 1 and 2 mark.
Okay, I have a theory. All right. I have a theory that you are a closet Ohio State fan, and the reason you want to do
Not
six
true.
is because they are right now currently or finished as number six. And you remember, I don't know if you remember Ohio State a few years back, they got into the playoff. I think
We don't
was
need to talk
the
about
four seed.
we don't need to talk about that
There was
here.
a team that they thought
We don't
there was
that
down
deserved to
south
be
that
there.
they thought
That
maybe.
no, didn't think. Definitely deserved. Definitely deserved to be there.
So yeah, so TCU did not make it. Ohio State did. Okay. So, anyways, and you still remember that quite well. Now, I will
Yeah, I don't
say
know why
this.
it needed to be brought up. To be honest, just
I
makes me
will say
sad.
I will push back a little bit, not so much with the six here, but I do think there's a good chance what they would do is they would put Ohio State maybe at 5 or something because Cincinnati and Notre Dame have already played. They might move it a little bit. Just kind of like
Oh yeah,
let's get some
yeah.
different
They
matchups
would fudge
and
those.
maybe do Georgia
Listen,
versus Notre Dame and Cincinnati
yeah,
versus Ohio State. But I do want to go into that because that we did talk about this before.
yeah.
If they do like home games, which I think they would, I would hope they do instead of
Well,
just
yeah.
putting them like in bowl
Let's
games.
just go into 8. Let's just
Well,
go into 8 because
well,
that's when the home games would come in.
well, no. But what would you do right now? Would you do? Wouldn't 3v6 be a Georgia home game? Because then you're down to 4 like we have now. So Georgia
Yeah, I guess
versus
they could make them home.
yeah,
Yeah.
Georgia versus Notre Dame in Georgia. Obviously, two big schools. I don't think that's bad. Cincinnati versus Ohio State, with Ohio State going in to Cincinnati. And I personally think that would be absolutely fantastic. I wish we could make this happen right now because
Oh, I
Ohio State going into Cincinnati, they don't want to do it.
no. I mean,
They're
they refuse to schedule them.
they're
Like they
the
don't want to
big
play them in Columbus. They definitely don't want to play them in
they're the
Cincinnati.
big boys on the block, obviously, but they go that would to me almost seem like it's like we're Ohio State. We sign here, probably getting paid a lot too, even before it was legal. But they signed with Ohio
I mean, that was.
State.
Let's just put this on the table. That was every team,
Yeah,
every single
so
team. Let's
a
not
lot of
single
teams.
anybody out.
But yeah, so Ohio State, like they signed, they're like, we did not sign up to go into Cincinnati. This is not
Yeah,
what we signed up for. And they're going into Cincinnati. I think that would be hilarious. I think that
yeah.
would also be just a great state battle that we don't see. We don't get to see it, and it's crazy because
No.
it's two great. I mean, I know it's obviously Ohio State is up here and Cincinnati's down here, but Cincinnati's
Yeah.
coming, and they're up and coming, and you would love to see that more with I can't you're not in-state
Well,
rivals because they
especially
don't
like
play, but
no. Well, and we both live in Ohio. Like we've seen, we're surrounded by Ohio State fans. We've seen the schedule. Ohio will play every other Group of Five team inside of Ohio. They just won't play Cincinnati. Like I've seen them pretty much schedule. We have a lot of like Group of Five colleges in Ohio. There's a ton of them, and I've seen Ohio State schedule every single one of them, but they will not schedule Cincinnati.
I thought you were like doing the Michigan thing. You kept calling them Ohio, like beat Ohio. They do that because
I
so
don't care that much.
but anyways, yeah, so not the Ohio Bobcats. We're talking about the Ohio State
No,
Buckeyes.
they'll play them. They have
will.
no issue playing.
But anyway, so that would be cool. I do think the buys coming in for Alabama and Michigan, and I
Yeah.
think we talked about this with the 1 and 2. Those would be deserved. I think this year that would
Yeah.
always be a question too. Sometimes it's the same before, like who actually the 2 or the 3. But I will. This is the issue I have. Is a couple issues I have. The first issue, and then I'll get to the second issue. So with the whole thing, but I think it makes sense to talk about how 8 works, and
Yeah.
then kind of the difference. So 8 teams, no buys. We don't need buys. We want to play football. We signed it. We didn't sign to rest. All right. So we don't need rest. We want to play on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. That's how we want to do this.
Butler also wants all 18 games of the NFL season to be played too. No buys.
So Sunday you got the 8 teams, and then you're down to 4 on Monday, and then on Tuesday you got national championship.
Oh, we're going basketball
Okay.
rules.
Anyway, so yeah, so you'd have your 8 teams this week. This time it would be out. I think the committee would kind of mess with this if you.
Oh, they absolutely would.
Alabama versus.
I mean,
Ole
they
Miss.
did that
might
this
move,
year.
They might move Ole Miss to Baylor. You get Alabama versus Baylor. I know you're a big Baylor fan, so you'd see that. And like Cincinnati and Notre Dame, like they might move Ohio State or something to get that.
Yeah, they'd fudge it.
You'd have Alabama versus Baylor, we'll say. I think that would be what they would do in Tuscaloosa. I think that would be great. I obviously would think Alabama would win. You would get Michigan then versus Ole Miss, a nice SEC versus Big Ten. I think that's good.
Nice game.
Georgia versus Notre Dame, which we've already talked about. I think that would be how they would move it around. And then Cincinnati versus Ohio State still. So that would be fantastic. So and they would be home games. You get 4 home games. Some of the top.
I'll give you this. I could not tell you how much I love the idea of the first round of the playoffs being at home. I think that should be an awesome reward for these teams. And can you imagine, like, college football already has that atmosphere? Like, there's nothing like that. Can you imagine a playoff game in Tuscaloosa or in the Big House or I don't know what Georgia's field's called. I'm sorry, in Georgia, or especially this year at Nippert in Cincinnati? Like those crowds would be insane.
Yeah, people like if Penn State made a run, which they're a top program, they will sometimes. Penn State,
that'd be
Happy
crazy.
Valley. That's one of my favorite. I think I grew up as like Ohio State. My dad was an Ohio State fan. A lot of people in my family was Ohio State fans. So like,
I mean, we grew up in Ohio.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people were out of. So I'm like, okay, sure, I like the Buckeyes. But as I got older, I'm like, I really don't care that much. So I just love watching Big Ten football. And I kind of fell in love. I think this was when I turned. I wouldn't say I fell in love with Penn State, but just the atmosphere. That Penn State, the whiteout they do at night games when it's just all white, it looks so amazing.
And they would do that for a playoff game. Yeah, like you just know they would.
It would be incredible atmosphere. A lot of these Big Ten schools, SEC schools, even out west, Oregon's and USC would come when they're going to be back soon, and some of these schools have some good atmospheres as well. So yeah, I would be so pumped for that, and that would be 4 playoff games, home games, and so this is what I'm gonna push back on 6-6. So we have talked about this a little bit. So
yeah,
the bye weeks, I do think so. When you have this long a layoff between games, I always worry that. This might change depending on how they set it up. Maybe there wouldn't be as much layoff, but when you have a long layoff, I do worry that there. I mean, again, if you start testing it, maybe they go to 6 and then eventually go to 8 very quickly. But if you go to 6 and you have these 1 and 2 teams, Michigan, Alabama getting a bye, and then Georgia coming off of a win versus Ohio State, I just feel like they would be rolling. And then they go to play Michigan, or if that would be how it would work out. And I just feel like there's a good chance that just Georgia would be much more in, like they've
Yeah.
recently played, and so I'd be a little bit like the bye. It might not even be that great to have that
Yeah,
bye,
and
and with that, the home teams getting games in an 8 team, the 1 and 2 seed don't get a home. They don't even get a home playoff game. So what happens is
yeah.
they would lose out on some revenue, obviously. And what do you do then if you do 6? I almost feel like the I still feel like you need like home playoff games is just the way to go. So the
I
three
love it so
versus
much.
6, 4 versus 5, but I feel like the 1 and 2 should get a home team too. So then you do the 1v winner of one, and then two they get home, and then like the Rose
Then we've
Bowl and the
lost bowl
Fiat, like
games, yeah.
so it's like it to me like I'm not really sure how it'd work. Maybe there's a way. Let me know in the if you have
I
a
I
way for
think yeah,
6 to
I
work.
think in 6, I think the more likely if they did do 6, I think they would just make it 2 more bowl games. Like, as much as I'd love to see home playoff football, I think they would make it 2 different bowl
Yeah, and I
games.
think that's a good chance they would do that too. So I think we would miss out on some crazy games.
Yeah.
Just I just can't imagine seeing uh Alabama, like say Alabama had a loss or two, say they're like a 5 or a 6, and having to go in, Alabama doesn't scale everybody, having to go in to wherever, maybe it's Notre
Yeah.
Dame, South Bend, or maybe go into Penn State or into Michigan
Well,
or
even,
into
like, if this
Cincinnati or something. Can
yeah.
you imagine
Well,
Alabama going into Cincinnati?
yeah, and even, like, Cincinnati's pushing it. Like, they obviously, this is a different thing, like, going to Cincinnati would be like, let's say Baylor won another game and they had got into that top 4. Like, even with saying Alabama going to somewhere like Baylor, like, as much as I hate them, that would still be like, that is not something Alabama would ever be willing to do in the regular season. They're
Yeah, for
never gonna
sure.
agree to that.
So obviously, this is the thing too. The conferences are very powerful. The teams even more so. So they were gonna have to sign off on all of this. But I think with the amount of money that would be on the table, I
Yeah.
do think 8 is possible. I think that's the thing, right?
I will
Alabama
say
right now,
I'll
I think the SEC would be hesitant to, because the SEC is killing it right now. They have almost, I think every year we're probably going to get 2 teams, unless like if Alabama would have lost, they probably didn't get 2 teams this year. So, but like a lot of years they get 2 teams out of the 4. They obviously always get one; they're guaranteed that. So I think they could be a little bit hesitant, but I think every other conference would be, obviously the Pac-12. They feel like they're probably going to be left out. Now the new Big 12, when that all comes together, they probably would want expansion, and then obviously all the
mhm,
little schools too. So I think SEC would be the real, and I know they're super powerful, and that would be a barrier.
yeah,
But I think the amount of money that would be on the line, and I would think that you could take a game out of the schedule, um, and you could still maybe a conference game even, because you're maybe even get those in the playoffs. So you could maybe take a conference game out, take out one other game, have an extra bye or something if that might help. You could definitely make it so you're not playing as like crazy amounts of games, I think, and still make the schedule work. I'm really worried about them making the students play, athletes. They're getting paid now, so I don't know what I mean. It's supposed to
yeah.
call them.
I feel like the student thing
Um,
is out the window at this point.
but making them pay
Um,
like 15 games, 16 games, I think
yeah,
I'm worried that they could go that route. And if it's all about money, obviously they would want that. But
yeah,
I like 8 and maybe like 11, 10 or 11 regular season games, and then maybe 10, and then a championship game, and then at max you're playing 14, and that's
yeah.
a lot of teams will play 11 or 12.
Yeah. No, I honestly, um, as much as I like 6, I get the bye week thing. To me, it's a you also have those other teams have another week of injuries. Like, football's a violent sport. Like, you could somebody big could go down in those games. Like, so there's that. I get the rust thing. I personally think that the likely option is 8. I think it makes the most sense. I also, as much as we want and we love home games, I feel like the sponsorship opportunities might be too big for them just to make those bowl games. But I don't understand that point either, solely because of you could still sponsor playoff round 1 at Tuscaloosa. Like, that would still sponsor like crazy. So,
Yeah.
I will say if they do grow this system, I think the likely culprit is 8, and I just hope those first rounds are at home. Like, that is my biggest thing.
Yeah, and I think first round's home, second round, sure it could be home,
Same
but
as
I
now.
think it would probably be what it is now,
Yeah.
which is fine because the Rose Bowl, you got the Orange Bowl,
Yeah,
you
I
have the
actually
Fiesta
really
Bowl,
like the way they do the system now for
so you,
4,
you
so
have the Sugar Bowl, you have all these big bowl games, so I think that's fine, uh, to have the national championship, like at the Rose Bowl or something. I think that's cool. I don't think you want to have the national championship, especially maybe the round of four when there's down to four. But when you get to the national championship, I don't think you want to have that being a home or because
no, no, not a
that's just
chance,
too
no.
much influence on the because
I
this is
mean,
already
to
kind of
me
like we're just guessing on the rankings. We're kind of like
yeah.
obviously at the beginning of the year you have rankings, and at the end of the year you have rankings that are completely different. The team at the beginning of the year they do get better, they get worse, whatever. But some teams are really really good at the beginning of the year, and you just don't know, and you're off on the ranking. And some teams you have really high, Clemson, at the beginning of the year, and many others, and they're not
Yeah.
very good. And so we're just kind of guessing when we put these rankings out there. The committee's like, okay, this is what our eyes tell us, but until we play the game, we really don't know. Until we
Yeah.
see Cincinnati play Alabama, we don't know for sure. We think that
No,
Alabama
we
is
don't know
way
for sure.
better,
We feel
but
confident, but
like let them play, and see. And it's not. I don't think it's really fair to say or against Alabama, Michigan, say those and say Michigan, you're gonna have to go into Alabama, go into Tuscaloosa because we ranked you number two, that sort of thing. So
yeah. I will say I think the committee like we talked about is very worried about Cincinnati being there. Are they a draw? I think as long as Cincinnati keeps that, I think that game is going to start off with crazy rankings because I think people are going to be interested. And I think as long as Cincinnati hangs with them, that game could be one of the most viewed college football games because people want to see what happens when these teams face off.
I hear you, but I think generally, like that's always what people say, but at the end, like the big names, they're big names for a reason, and it's like you're like, oh yeah, I want to see Cincinnati win, but is that you want Cincinnati to win, or you want to see Cincinnati? Is that enough to get you to tune in? I don't know.
Oh yeah,
I don't
yeah. I think
know.
yeah. No, I
Um,
get that, but
that
I will say it has the biggest chance of nobody watching in the second half. Like
because
it does have
Cincinnati is just routing them. Um, yeah, that's what's
yeah.
gonna
That's what I
happen.
meant. But
Uh, but I think I personally think that 8 teams, based on what
mm,
I now and what I can see, unless I think it's the perfect system.
yeah.
You think that six
I I like
is
6.
fine?
I'd be very happy with 8. I like 6 a lot. I think 8 is more likely.
I think the thing
And
with six just around is like I think six is better for the quality of teams in the regular season for what, but I don't think logically it works out as well as eight. I think that
I
six
think that's true. Yeah.
is like you're getting six teams that you could say could all most likely have a shot to win a national championship and all pretty good teams. At eight, you get Ole Miss in there, even Baylor who has a couple losses, Ole Miss has a couple losses. You're like, like probably not. Alabama's gonna probably beat Ole Miss pretty easily, and Baylor. Are they really that good? Yeah, but I just think it works out.
Yeah.
It
It just
logically
comes
works out a little
down
better.
to it really comes down to do they want an NFL style playoff or do they want a college basketball style playoff? Because college basketball you don't get buys. Like doesn't matter where you're ranked, you start off with a game. In the NFL, they do reward you. So it kind of depends on which way they want to go. I think most likely A, ease, B, money. And the biggest thing is something you pointed out that I didn't catch on my like just thinking about this is this year Alabama in a 6 versus an 8, Alabama and Michigan would have got cheated out of a home game. And that does seem like it would be a downside to a 6 team.
Yeah. If they do home games for the three versus
Yeah.
six and four versus five.
Which I
So
think if they don't do that is a huge miss on their part.
yeah, I think it would be phenomenal. And the only reason it wouldn't happen is if some of these teams, some of these conferences would push back and say no because they don't want to face. But like when the amount of money that's on the line, You have a chance to win a national championship. What more could you want? I think that's always the thing. SEC, even some other teams like
Well, that's the
why
SEC would get an
schedule
extra. Yeah, SEC would
hard
get an extra
teams?
team in.
Yeah, why
Like,
schedule hard teams if you don't need to? That's kind of like why would Alabama schedule a hard team that could be difficult and have them a loss, and then it could cause them not to get into the playoff? They're like, as long as we take care of business in our conference, we're gonna make the playoffs. So why would we want to do that? So I think and they want to win national championships, but when you put the money out there, you put you get maybe hopefully a home game, and you say, yes, you will play some of these games that you may not want to play in the regular season, but I mean, that's fine because you're playing for a national championship. Like, this is it.
yeah,
You got to win 3 games or two, however many games you have, make them play. You got to win 2, 3 games, and you win a national championship. And I don't think any team or conference is going to get in the way. I would think not, but
no.
I don't know. Get in the way of trying, doing something like that. Now, if it gets too out of hand, 16, 64 or
Yeah,
something, then I'd be like, okay,
we've
this
talked about
is
going up, but I think that's too much. But yeah, I think they're almost definitely going to expand relatively soon, and I honestly think they'll probably go all the way to 8. And here's the thing, it's gonna help. I know, like, people are like, "Oh, the big conference are gonna," it's gonna help the SEC, it's gonna help the Big Ten. Like, those 2 conferences are gonna get more to, like, this year, if
at
that had
least
happened,
2, maybe 3.
yeah, like, the Big Ten would've got another team in, the SEC would get another team in. It would've vastly helped the Big 12 this season. They would've got a team in instead of none. Like,
They might have got 2 in if depending on some years, they might get 2 in as
yeah,
well.
exactly. So, and it's going to give, like, all this drama with Cincinnati, which was fun, wouldn't have happened because you would have known. If one of those group of 5, as long as they, like, almost, if it gives these group of 5 teams hope. If you can run your schedule, you're probably gonna make the top 8. So it also opens it up for the little guys a lot.
Yeah, and you get the home game if you get in the top 4, so it incentivizes you to not just make the playoff, but win. Win out,
Yeah.
or Georgia. Sometimes losing, like Georgia ended up losing at the end there. It didn't really matter, but Georgia kind of proved in the other 12
That's like the
games that
one
they're
situation where that
yeah,
doesn't matter.
where
Like,
you might they're probably not going to fall outside the top 4, but there's probably some little things to make it a much better system. But I think that overall, the basic idea is keep the system exactly how it is, just expand it, and then home playoff. That's kind of my
home
idea.
games.
Eight,
Home
keep
games.
it. You can keep the same committee. If that's fine, I guess. Keep the same committee.
I'm not smart to think of a better solution, so yeah,
So
let's
yeah,
do
just
that.
keep that. Or bring back the computers. Let them do it. That's always fun. See what they
I
do on.
don't
I think it's more interesting, but no, actually, they're not gonna do that. But I thought it was interesting. What are these
yeah.
computers actually doing? But anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button. I know we talked a lot about. I really want to make sure we hammered it down, and I enjoy talking about it. So hopefully, my enthusiasm, my
Yeah,
enjoyment
it's a
of
lot
the
of fun.
topic. These are types of videos that we want to do. So if you like that, hit the subscribe button. A lot of I personally am kind of thinking like how it doesn't necessarily have to be how to fix. When I got fix everything. But
Oh, no, we're gonna fix
yeah,
everything.
maybe. But a lot of videos just some what ifs, or how we could do certain things, or certain things like that. I'm sure if we have some good ideas on that that are fun topics, you will see them. So subscribe, turn on notifications, leave a comment with your thoughts and anything else.
I got nothing. This was a lot of
Like
fun.
as well if you enjoyed. That
Absolutely.
is fantastic. And if you dislike, you can't see it anymore. So joke's on you. Why would you dislike the video if you're this far? Hit
Yeah.
the like button.
We've If you're disliking it solely to hurt our feelings.
Yes, because I can see it, but you can't see it. But I can see it. You can see it. I mean, the people
And
can see
and Bo's a crier, so
it.
you don't wanna see that.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. See ya.
Yeah.